And we're live. I overslept this morning, so I
Oh,
missed my
okay.
mastermind. I missed my mastermind meetings or
Oh,
session for
wow.
this morning because I have my headset connected to my cell phone, and so I never heard my alarm go off. That and I
Oh,
kept
wow.
waking up in the middle of the
Sorry.
night. But how's everything with you?
I won't lie, stressful as hell. I had to travel to Port Harcourt to see my sister. It's still in Nigeria, but it's kind of very far. So I stayed with them for quite a while, like close to 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So while I was there, I got to meet my nephew and my nieces. So yeah, that was also fun as well. We got to even do a YouTube video I got to do a YouTube video with my sisters. So that was cool. Yeah, but most then there's that. Then there is also some relocation stuff I'm trying to relocate out of the country, and you know, a mixture of all that mixed with my regular job, mixed with my mentorship. So I've just been so busy. Plus, I even have um, I've been preparing for the F Sharp exchange because I think I'll be speaking. That's partially thanks to you as well. So it's been quite, should I say, it's been quite hectic for me. I won't lie. So, but I think it's for the best. It's all good.
Well, we moving to Canada.
Yeah. That's my hope and my prayer. I
Mm,
think at this point I've submitted all my documents. I think I've even done the biometrics as well. So I'm just waiting for the feedback from that one. In these days of COVID, right? Such things now take almost forever. So, but
Good luck. I'm trying to get. I'm trying to deal with the embassies in Canada, and like they're shut down. Like they're
yeah,
shut
for
down.
real, for real,
Like I
for
paid
real.
my money for an application. They're shut down. Like I call them. Like they don't respond to my emails. Like they're closed, and it's like it's annoying. They took my money
Mm,
for the application fee, and I never heard from them again. So
that's
I'm in
crazy.
Canada. I'm in Canada right now.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
that's nice.
yeah, I also was politely pressured into giving a lightning talk at F Sharp Exchange. So I'm trying to figure out the title and the abstract,
Oh,
and I think I'm gonna call it integrating DDD with your compiler. I think I'm gonna go with
mm,
that.
okay. That sounds great actually. My own topic is writing a custom type provider. At
Yeah,
least that's what I decided to stick with. I think type providers are quite important, especially in the era we're heading into of interactive programming, where it's no longer, very soon, it's no longer going to be about, starting Visual Studio, creating a new project, and writing code. Now you typically, bless you, now you
yeah.
typically want to have some kind of document that you can use for data exploration, coding, and all that. So yeah, and that yeah, that's pretty much what my talk is going to be on. Because if you remember, I think the last time we spoke, I talked about how my company, we build tools for scientists, data tools for scientists. So um, we have this, I will call it an online CSV database, um, device data that allows scientists to upload their data sets that generate either from experiments or from whatever hardware or tool that they are building, and then it gives them the ability to just upload it and publish those CSVs in a way that when it's uploaded, there's some processing that goes on where we do some analysis. We try to collect like metadata about that data as well, and present an API that anyone can just call. So add that, the data collection aspect, with the exploration and the presentation of it. So say, for example, you wanted to write, you wanted to, let's take COVID data, for example, right? So there are people that get, there are cases that are going up, there are people who are dying from it, there are people who are recovering from it, and those numbers keep changing, right? So you have a scenario where maybe as a company, you can write some code that extracts the CSV data on a daily basis and uploads it to something like the advice data database, and we keep versions of all the CSV data, because scientists are really big on reproducibility. And then from there, we expose an API that the user can then go to something like Observable or Jupyter Notebooks or something like that, and just read the data and start draw graphs and all those kind of stuff based on the data that has already come in. So type providers are a very strong way of doing all that. So my talk will be on writing a type provider for advice data, which is a custom data source. But as you imagine, I have to actually write the freaking thing. So I have to go ahead and write the type provider. I have to go ahead and test the type provider. Then I now have to figure out a way of breaking the code into small chunks that I can maybe put on a slide and explain, okay, this is how this works, this is how that works, and all that. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but I hope to finish before F# Exchange, which is towards the end of October, like 26th or so, 25th to 26th of October. So yeah, just
I was reviewing.
We'll see how it goes.
They were kind enough to send me an invite to be on the committee for the conference, F# Exchange, and I was looking at the different proposals. They all look good to me. My only issue is they're all vendor centric for the most part. Yours isn't, because yours is like kind of core to F#'s feature of type providers, but everything else was like, well, I mean, Fable's not really vendor specific, but it's like a separate framework. And so, like, I saw talks on Fable. I saw talks on some open source projects. Saw talks on I think like Azure, with F#, and I felt like that was cool, but that was kind of like geared towards people that are like already intermediate with F#, and it's not really like catering to people that are willing to take the leap into F#. Like, I feel like all that stuff is like they assume that you have basic fundamentals with that paradigm, and they're just providing sessions on how you can integrate that with other tools, which I kind of voiced that. But they're like, well, we assume that our audience is going to be, F# users and not people that are virgins to it. So I know when I went to the F# conference, I was like green. I wanted to learn, right? So I paid money to go to the conference, to do the workshops. So I guess different people have different motivations. So I assume I was a minority in regards to my motivation. So that's it. Outside of that,
honestly, yeah. So in my opinion, I think it's you need a mix of all three. You need a mix of the entry level sessions, the intermediate sessions, and the advanced sessions, because I can also see their point as well, in the sense that people who are already, conversant with F#, who have started learning the language, they may find talks on the basics, boring and mundane, because initially when F# was still coming up, right, there were a lot of introduction to F# classes and sessions that once you got past the introduction, those sessions just became very boring and, annoying. And I remember getting stuck stuck with, okay, now I know how to, write functions and I know what currying and all of those things are. Well, how do I assemble an application? Like if I was to be seriously building something, how the hell do I go about it? And finding materials on that was actually very scarce. So I would strongly suggest that you need a mixture of the three. My own talk, believe it or not, is actually in the expert end, because most people are not going to be writing type providers, right? But the very few that will find it very important. So the way I would think about it is your beginner course will just teach you, okay, this is what F sharp is, this is how F sharp works. Intermediate will be, okay, this is how you use a type provider, this is how you reference type providers and stuff like that. Then advanced will be, okay, this is how you write your own custom type providers. So I think you need a mixture of all three. You need something that, the people who are already veterans in F sharp, you need them to want to look forward to learning something new. So I kind of get their aspect with, we don't want, we assume that our audience is just going to be F sharp centric people, but I feel like they should have all three. They should have all three. Now the balance can now be different. You can now say, okay, based on our attendance, we want to have more of the intermediate or more of the expert and maybe less of the beginner. That is fine, but at least have something there for the absolute beginner. I think that is really critical. One thing I would criticize though is they should not cater to a C sharp audience. And that's something that F sharp has been very, very notorious for. So when it's almost as though anytime we want new, when we were trying to we're preaching F sharp to other .NET people. And I feel like that's a mistake. And I think some people in the community are starting to realize that it's not a good idea. It's just to say, this is what F sharp is, this is what it stands for. And you find out that it's actually the Python people that I noticed that actually really dig F sharp more than the C sharp people. So I think marketing F sharp to an audience outside of .NET people would actually go a long way, in my opinion. Part of it too is that C sharp has a lot of dogma. So the C sharp community, they have a lot of things they believe. So an F sharp is like this wrecking ball, they just come and smashes all their beliefs. So yeah, there's resistance, not just resistance of learning something new. There's a resistance of, are you trying to tell me that what I've been doing all this while is wrong? So I feel like, yeah, marketing F sharp to C sharp is probably much harder than marketing F sharp to just absolute newbies, people who are just new to programming, or people in other fields like JavaScript, for example. So yeah, it's just something to think about anyway.
Yeah, I recently live streamed a talk called "The Four Limitations of the OOP Developer," in which I was bashing object-oriented programmers, C sharp, Java, or whatever. I feel like they're so deep into that paradigm that it's really hard to come out of it. It's really hard to see anything other than the Kool-Aid that you've been fed. Hold on for 1 second. I'm trying to do three things at once. Maybe.
Absolutely.
Dude, we're juggling like 2 different clients and doing a live stream while I'm on my lunch break. So I honestly, I gave up on F sharp having a moderate share in the marketplace. I just accepted it, right? That it's something niche that I've personally taken the time to appreciate, and it works for me. The only thing I could do is just poke fun at other people that just don't see it, and that's it. So I I'll take jabs at them,
Mm.
and you can call it me being an elitist, me being arrogant, but it's Microsoft has demonstrated since 2008 that this isn't something that they're going to stand behind. They stood behind what was it called back in
JavaScript.
2012. But what was the framework? What was that framework called for Windows Store apps? Like they had more
Oh,
tutorials
Win,
on
yeah,
WinJS.
yeah.
They stood
WinJS,
behind WinJS, marketed the
yes,
hell out of it,
JavaScript.
right?
Yeah.
So I just accept it.
So
What are these comments?
here's my take on it, right? I feel like, so my take on it is this. I think it's a good thing in a way that Microsoft isn't pushing F sharp as we might want it to, because you have to understand that F sharp as a language kind of has the case of, Microsoft endorsing something is kind of like the kiss of death in a way, because if you're not someone who lives in the Microsoft ecosystem, you won't really see it. Part of the reason, for example, that .NET has been held back is precisely because people who, if you go outside and say, oh, I want to use .NET for my application, they're like, oh, this Microsoft Windows thing. And Microsoft has spent a lot of money and effort trying to distance themselves away from that perception. I think that's the case. I think what F sharp needs is pretty much what helped Python to succeed. Steady, sustainable growth, right? Plus, plus a healthy ecosystem. So, for example, in the Python community, right? Initially, Google were the ones pushing Python, but it has gone beyond Google at this point, right? They have conferences where different companies, not just Google, come to talk about Python, talk about the innovations in Python. Having I can't remember the name of their leader. They call him the benevolent dictator for life, BDC. So he'll be the equivalent of our Don Sign, for example, who just comes and says, this is the direction the language is going, and people just have to live with it, So, and I think that has helped Python a lot. If anything has held F sharp back, is two things. One is it's the fact that it has the Microsoft branding on it, and Microsoft doesn't want to push it. So it's kind of stuck in a very bad limbo, in the sense that there are people outside of Microsoft see F sharp as a Microsoft thing, and Microsoft doesn't see F sharp as a Microsoft thing. so it's what it is. But at the same time, it's like if the F sharp community pushes towards the direction of saying, hey, we're just a functional language, just like OCaml, just like Scala, just like Clojure, right? And just stick with that. And I feel like
No, it's not
as
going to work.
much as no, let me tell you why. Because if you really think about it, F sharp is not as popular as we would like it to be, but it is still very, very popular as a functional language. Trust me, compared to languages like Clojure, languages like Haskell, right? F sharp is probably one of the top 5 or top 2.
Top what? Okay, now our connection's messing up now. Odie,
There.
yeah.
It's like I broke off something.
You,
So I was
you,
saying
you
that
make
it's
your video is pixelated. I don't know if it makes a difference
oh,
if you just use your profile image instead. I don't know.
okay.
I don't know if it's your end or my end. IDK.
No, I think, let me see. I think StreamYard records, because at my end it's not pixelated, so it could be a network thing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So but maybe by the time maybe by the time the recording goes up, it will be clear. So let's just hope that that's the case. So like I was saying, in F sharp isn't as popular as we would like it to be, but
it's not
it's
popular
still
at
one of the
all.
most popular functional languages.
It's
Really?
not popular at all.
No,
It's not.
I disagree.
I've accepted
Okay, what
that.
metrics do you want to use?
I've accepted that even though F sharp is my go-to
No, I'm
language.
saying
What's up?
I'm saying what metrics do you want to use? Is it by number of developers? So compare F sharp with the other languages that it's competing with. It's competing with the likes of Haskell. Let's remove Scala because Scala is a lot more successful than F sharp. Scala should be number one in terms of most adopted functional languages, right? You can't take it away. Scala first, probably F sharp. F sharp and Clojure are probably struggling for number 2 and 3. And then you now have Haskell as a strong number 4. Or that's my impression of it. What metrics am I using? Look at GitHub repos, look at Stack Overflow questions, look at even the Stack Overflow survey, look at TOB ranking list. You'll see that functional languages across the board are not popular, right? And out of all functional languages, F sharp is doing well. Let's put it that way. Okay?
I don't think
now,
it is.
compared to who F sharp is, no, I said, see, success is relative, right? Compared to what it could be,
F sharp is in last place, right? Like I've read a Scala book, right? I've consumed hella videos on Scala, and although it's popular, I see that it doesn't compete with F sharp, right? That might be my ignorance based on the limited exposure that I have researched in Scala, but it just doesn't have the features that F sharp has. So I feel like F sharp is more advanced, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't, right? The thing that you left out with your matrix or metrics is enterprise adoption, right? What are people want a job? Period. That's the motivation. That's the most significant motivation. It's not because something is cool. It's not because it's not. It's people want a job. And so far, what I do see is I see Scala jobs, which probably isn't really Scala. It's probably object oriented Scala. I see on rare occasion Haskell jobs. Recently, I saw Haskell jobs that were advertising $200,000 a year. And on rare occasion, I see Clojure, right? And it's weird because when I say on rare occasion, like, I mean, like maybe once a month, I might see like 2 opportunities for each of those languages. I never see a dedicated F sharp developer want it. Like, I don't. It's, am I the biggest fan of F sharp? Would I do it? Would I prefer F sharp over Scala? Or of course, would I prefer F sharp over Haskell? Probably not, but I try to learn Haskell, and it seems like to get set up and running with a dedicated IDE, I feel like it's too much overhead, and I can't figure it out. But to make a long story short, like, I've accepted, right? It's like someone that is diagnosed and they just have to live with something, for the rest of their life. I've gone through the process. I've accepted it, right? And so it's, for me, I'm going to use it whenever I have an opportunity. And my job is to build software, and they don't get in my way about how I build it. Then F sharp is going to be the way to go because I've developed my competency. But outside of that, man, like, it's not going to go anywhere as long as.
No,
okay,
I get you. We're saying the same thing. What I'm saying is that F sharp's obscurity is not unique to F sharp, right? It applies to all functional languages, all strong functional languages, right? Where, yes, it's not it's not unique to F Sharp. Reason, for example, has less fan base than F Sharp. OCaml, that F Sharp came from, has less popularity than F Sharp, right? And I can keep naming functional after functional languages. It's what it is, right? It's like, how do I put it in a way that makes sense? F Sharp belongs to a very niche culture. So the only reason you and I are using F Sharp today is because out of that niche culture of functional languages, right? F Sharp seems to have the best tools, setup, deployment stories, application types, and so on and so forth, right? It doesn't mean that F Sharp is where it's supposed to be. And part of the reason why it's not where it's supposed to be, and part of the reason why we feel like F Sharp is not popular, is precisely because we look at languages like C Sharp, languages like Java, languages like even Scala, and it's like, why is F Sharp not as popular as Scala? Well, the answer is very simple. Okay, I think there is one exception. Let's take Kotlin. Kotlin isn't really functional, but in the functional scale, it's actually closer to F Sharp than C Sharp, right? So it's more functional than C Sharp. Kotlin is successful because Google is pushing Kotlin. So people like us see the way Google is pushing Kotlin, and we feel like, Microsoft, what are you doing? This is supposed to be your language for data science, for machine learning. This is supposed to be an excellent language for data analysis and so on and so forth. But rather, you have more Python tutorials on your platform than F Sharp that you supposedly own. And to some extent, I don't really blame them. It's a business for Microsoft, right? They see that anything that threatens C Sharp, right? I don't just know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. And to be honest, I don't really care that much. I think part of the reason why, F Sharp hasn't gotten the kind of adoption it needs is because we in the community are too focused on building or on teaching it rather than building stuff with it, right? Go is one of the most popular programming languages now, not necessarily because Google is pushing it, but because they've built a lot of stuff with it. So people are now saying, wow, this was built in Go, that was built in Go. Oh, Docker was built in Go, wow. And they now want to learn, Go carries the prestige of the things it's built with. Does that make sense? So if we as a community start looking at what are the things that people use in the enterprise that make sense, that improves their lives in some way, shape, or form, and can we build those things with F Sharp, you see F Sharp would improve in adoption naturally. Do you get what I mean? So it's one of the reasons why Microsoft keeps pushing. Oh, Stack Overflow is the biggest website built with .NET. There's a reason they do that, because it sends a message to CTOs, to people who hire software engineers, and look, you can build your entire stack in .NET and it's fine and it will run and it can scale. Does that make sense? So if there is a problem, the idea that we need Microsoft to push F Sharp, I feel like is one of those things where we should be careful what we wish for. Because if Microsoft should push F Sharp the way they push everything they normally push, we might not like the outcome, right? We might end up with a situation where they dictate and say, okay, you need this framework, this framework, this framework, and this enterprise support, and people who maybe open source people will just walk away from F Sharp, which isn't really what we want, and you see a little bit of that friction at the moment with things like VS Code and Ironide and Visual Studio. So Microsoft pushes Visual Studio as this is our IDE for F Sharp, and then the F Sharp community is writing Ironide. So you now have this conflict where
Visual Studio
it's almost like
does not. They do not push Microsoft or they do not push F Sharp for Visual Studio. They don't. They have resources allocated, but they don't push.
No, I'm saying they push Visual Studio as the default F Sharp environment. That's what I mean.
Okay.
Do you get? So but the community has rallied around VS Code and Ironide.
But that was the original intent of .NET. .NET was not C Sharp. .NET was Visual Basic.
True.
.NET, C Sharp, .NET. What was the other one? I'm missing one. other than F Sharp?
There was Iron Python, there's PowerShell, there was Iron Ruby, there was Fortran.net, there was
Well,
COBOL.net.
everything that distills down into Missile or Microsoft Intermediate Language, that was .NET,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
That's it. We'll just say Visual Basic and C Sharp. And then I think in 2008, F Sharp came, and that was still .NET. Now, like .NET is just C Sharp until someone says, "Oh no, F Sharp too," and they say, "Okay, F Sharp," and that's how it's treated. But .NET is C Sharp. Recruiters call me, and they'll say like, how many years of .NET do you have? And they mean C Sharp. Like that's it. I don't know what happened with that vision, right? Because it was supposed to be pick your language, build a solution. Different languages, like Visual Basic, is supposed to be good for processing XML. I haven't used it personally, but like different languages have different strengths. But all that just got cleared out. So
yeah, I think you should look at it from the perspective of Java, right? When Java started, it's like Java started from the other end. Java started as a one language, one platform thing. So you had Java and JVM. They were one and the same. So if someone came and said, how much Java experience do you have? Right? That just meant how much Java, the language, experience do you have? But look at how languages like Scala, look at how languages like, what do they call it? Scala, Kotlin, how they got out of the gate, how they were able to break off from that. And the way they were able to break off from it was the people in those communities built cool shit with it. That's it, right? Akka was with, Akka.net, Akka on the JVM was part of why Scala became so popular. Because people now realize that, oh, okay, XYZ company is scaling to hundreds of millions of messages. How did they do it? Oh, they used this library called Akka. What's it written in? It's written in Scala. Do you get it? So all of a sudden, there are now job postings for we need an Akka professional. You get what's going on? We need an Akka professional to come and teach, to come and develop whatever we want to do. And that Akka professional will come, and after 1 week of coding in Java, we'll be like, fuck it. Just say, give us, let's use Scala to write it. That's how it works. You get, and today, people don't see, when we hear Java and JVM, when people hear JVM, they're not just thinking of Java itself, even though Java still takes like a huge portion of it. I feel like that's what needs to happen in the .NET ecosystem if F Sharp is ever going to succeed, because Microsoft doesn't have any intention of pushing it. Let's be honest, Oracle doesn't have any intention of pushing Scala either. Do you get? Like Scala to them is like, yeah, you wrote this thing that runs on our JVM, fine, we'll allow it. But it was never Oracle never supported it. It was the community building stuff with Scala that made Scala popular, And I feel like that's one of the reasons I really like the company I work at, right? So we are an F Sharp shop, and we are building tools like that, right? Like, for example, the device data I just told you about, completely in F Sharp, end to end, including the UI client side, the back end, the front end, everything written in F Sharp. And it's been cool. And even doing that helps us understand that, okay, there are certain aspects of F Sharp that's not really friendly that we could improve upon. And then, we take that feedback and just build it in. I think, again, like I said, it all ties in with, we should stop preaching F Sharp to people. And like you said, because you're absolutely right, I've also accepted that F Sharp is never going to be the Kotlin of the .NET ecosystem, right? And that's fine. But at the same time, if we feel like our tool is superior, then we have to build superior products with it. Does that make sense? We have to have superior libraries. We have to have superior stories to show that, look, this thing is actually better. And it's only then that people listen to results. They don't listen to sentiment. They don't listen to.
I agree. I think you have to build the next disruptor app, and once it's
pretty much,
when you have a fifth of the world's population using that app that's built in F Sharp, then all of a sudden it's going to prove how stable, robust it is, and people will start doing that. Now, what's the likelihood of that happening? Very, very low, right? So, for example,
I agree.
I remember I bought a book on Erlang. Why did I buy a book on Erlang, Odie? What
Good
what
point.
app
Why?
is somewhat what app is somewhat coupled to Erlang's philosophy?
That's
WhatsApp.
the telecoms. WhatsApp.
WhatsApp.
Yeah, yeah, that's
All
true.
right.
WhatsApp.
That was the only reason I had interest in Erlang. And then I think Erlang had evolved into a separate application, or a separate application was derived from Erlang called Elixir, right?
Yeah.
But it's not static enough for me. So like I'm addicted to static types. But
Yeah.
that proves as an example of what would draw people. Now,
Exactly.
hell of web developers are migrating to React. I honestly don't know, but what application or applications are built on React such that there's this great migration?
Mm. Facebook.
Is it Facebook?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Facebook. Facebook.com itself is built with React.
okay.
So that's what's pumping all the hype.
So my argument is you have a product that takes like a fifth of the world's population of
Mhm.
users, and that's where the enterprise wants to go. That's
That's
where
it.
that's where I would argue a good chunk of startups are willing to entertain.
Mhm.
Whatever is holding up under that much stress and is still doing the damn thing, then people say, okay, we're going to invest in the stack. Why? Because it has a fifth of the world's population using it. And so, I mean, that's my personal opinion. So,
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I feel like I would just say that the next 10 years of F sharp is going to be different from the previous 10 years of F sharp. And I can assure you. Well, I just hope I'm right because I could be wrong. I have to always put that caveat. But I strongly feel that that's the case. Why do I feel that way? I think Microsoft's original grip is starting to soften. Microsoft's grip on we are purely C sharp. We don't care about any other language. Everything, all our documentation has to be in C sharp, and it is what it is, or leave it, right? That grip is starting to open up a little bit with things like .NET Core and so on and so forth, right? Also, you now have a scenario where the improvements that .NET is getting are actually coming to F sharp. Like recently, the benchmarks came out that showed that F sharp is killing it in .NET 5, even better than C sharp at this point because the number of abstractions are a lot less. So the number of abstractions in building a web server are less than with MVC, for example. So an
doesn't
application
matter.
written in Giraffe is. Wait, I'm explaining something. Yeah, I know it doesn't matter, but I'm just trying to explain that improvements are coming to F sharp, right? And we're
No, they're
we're
not.
starting to get to a, what I don't understand. What kind of improvements are not coming to F sharp? Can you explain?
F Sharp. Well, how many developers allocated to F Sharp on Visual Studio? What tools does F Sharp have that will pair with C Sharp inside Visual Studio? Have you ever tried to run static analysis on the F Sharp solution in Visual Studio? I will tell you the answer. No, you haven't, because it doesn't exist, right? F Sharp lacks the IDE tooling that C Sharp has. Until you make F Sharp, until F Sharp
Okay.
gains parity with C Sharp, which it will never ever gain parity with C Sharp in regards to tooling within the integrated development environment, people just aren't going to just gradually move over there. It's not enterprise enough, right? It's not. It doesn't have that
Have
investment.
you have you tried? Hold
We're
on,
talking. Hold on, 1 second. Just let me get
hold
this
on.
off.
Have you tried any other functional language?
Yes, I did. I did Elm. Thank you.
You did Elm.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you tried doing static analysis on an Elm project?
No, it doesn't exist to my knowledge. That's the short answer. But I could back that.
Exactly.
But I could back that up.
Exactly.
Your .NET developer is your
Mm-hmm.
typical enterprise developer.
Okay.
They're stuck in a paradigm which everything is Microsoft. They have certain expectations. They don't go outside of their bubble, right? They don't use languages like Elm. They don't entertain anything outside of
Mm-hmm.
the Microsoft stack. They don't. They don't. So like it's your it's the profile of the developer as well. So to your point, you're absolutely right. You could take some of these languages like Elm, probably even Scala, or yeah, probably Scala, Haskell, etc. And yeah, you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. They don't have the tooling, but the thing is they're not your typical enterprise .NET developer that's stuck in this bubble. And as
Okay.
much as that might be an
I see what you
unpopular
mean.
opinion, honestly believe those people. Like .NET developers are stuck in bubbles. They have no clue about the outside world and other alternatives. They
Yeah,
don't. They're not as polished.
I agree.
I'll say on record, .NET developers are not as polished as open source developers that use all the hipster languages. They're not. They're stuck.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Okay. So, but look at take two things, right, that came out of Microsoft, because this will drive my point home. Take Visual Studio on one hand and take VS Code on another hand. Both from Microsoft, both the same company, etc. But they are vastly different, right? Visual Studio caters to the guys you just talked about, the C# developer that likes the IDE, that doesn't really care about anything. And then you have Visual Studio Code that is targeted towards the open source developer. Now, Visual Studio Code is killing it, right? TypeScript is killing it because the people who are used to writing in JavaScript using tools like Atom, right? The people who write in JavaScript using tools like Atom have never experienced the kind of features you get from autocomplete that actually does autocomplete, right? Like being able to build and put breakpoints and debug. They aren't used to those things, and those things are Visual Studio features. But because I will tell you, when VS Code first came out, I was like, Microsoft, what are you thinking? This is never going to fly. Nobody in their right mind is ever going to use VS Code. And how wrong I was, right? Because the people who VS Code is targeted to don't give a shit about IDEs and all that, right? That's how I want you to see F#. Okay, F# isn't as enterprisey as C#. But at the same time, compared to what it's competing with, it is like way above and ahead, right? I tried learning Haskell. I tried playing around with Haskell IDEs, and they all suck. That's just the truth.
I couldn't even get to that point. I tried
Yeah.
a month ago to get up and started. I couldn't get an IDE set up. I couldn't.
They all suck. Like the best Haskell experience I've been able to set up is in VS Code. That should give you an idea of what I'm trying to say, in the sense that those improvements to the enterprise are seeping into F#. Take Giraffe, for example, right? Giraffe is a framework that,
I know I use it.
yeah, they are not, the guy that is writing it is just one guy, right? But it keeps getting better and better because what it sits on top of is becoming better and better, which is ASP.NET Core. So any improvements that are made to ASP.NET Core automatically seep into Giraffe. Things like something as niche, that as enterprise niche, as something like response caching, for example, being able to set cache headers, being able to do server-side caching is something that most frameworks, I would argue, don't have, or maybe don't implement, or stuff like that. Giraffe gets that for free because it's built on top of ASP.NET Core. In fact, the library I told you I wanted, as I started working on Antelope or whatever, is going to be built on top of Entity Framework, which means that whenever they make improvements to Entity Framework, I don't need to make any change. I just get that for free. So those are the sets of.
Why aren't you using the SQL provider?
So the reason I'm not using the SQL provider is because the SQL provider is weird. It's weird in the sense that it is vendor specific in its implementation. Okay, so if you are using the SQL provider to talk to, say, SQL Server, for example, then your queries have to have SQL Server related strings in them. But with Entity Framework, you're just dealing with objects, and it's purely it's 100%. How do I put it now? It's 100% type safe, because you're not dealing with writing SQL queries. You're not dealing with a provider that generates SQL queries for you directly. Rather, you're dealing with entities and, using something like a query expression. That's the only reason. In fact, it's the query expression in particular that's the real reason I am writing the language I'm writing. So, rather, the library I'm writing. So the idea is you write out the definition in a DBML document. So you say, oh, this table, this has these properties, this table has these other properties, and so on and so forth. And then with the type provider, I can generate types, objects that translate to your tables. And then for you to just write a query, all you just simply need to do is use the query expression and just say from item in so context, right? Group by, sort, filter, where, join, and all of that. And then,
I can't see myself using any framework anymore after
really?
using SQL Provider. But then again, I don't really use relational databases that much anymore.
Yeah, but for me, the reason I don't use SQL Provider, part of the reason is migrations as well, right? Migrations are not easy to do because it doesn't know what the schema of your database should be, right? So, and when you're doing something like a build pipeline, for example, so a build pipeline is a classic example of why I don't want to use the SQL Provider. When you want to compile your code without a DB connection, that becomes harder with a SQL Provider, if not impossible. Is it impossible? So I think it's impossible at this point. The old SQL entity provider had support for the older version of DBML, but even that is pretty much discontinued at this point. So I just felt the need that, okay, I need to write a library or a framework that would essentially allow you to have a schema definition of your database. And then if you wanted to have migrations, you just update that schema and it can generate migrations for you. Or if you don't want to do it that way, it should allow you. It's a provider that allows you build even though you don't have access to a database, because it's reading off a schema. Does that make sense?
Okay.
As opposed to reading off a live database. So it's something that it's something that I've used in the enterprise, right? So when I was working in an enterprise, we're using C# and entity framework. We used all those features a lot. So when I switched over to F# and I saw that those things are not there, I was like, how do I bring support for those kinds of stuff in F# without compromising the succinctness and the flexibility of F# with writing whole classes with mutable state and all this craziness in it. So that's pretty much the situation.
Good stuff. Well, I don't really have too much else to add on the F#. I feel like it's always a repeating conversation. But
yeah, I think we have to keep talking about it because I think my love for the language is at this point very, very strong. And I feel like every time we talk about it, we, not only rationalize our positions on certain topics, but also to just raise awareness to people, right? That, is what it is.
I know one thing, since practicing F# for, I think, more than 5 years now, whenever I have interviews for just .NET positions, I always bash the interviewer. Like, I feel like I'm scolding the person interviewing me on why would I do that? Why would I want to do that? Like, when they ask me these certain interview questions about, concurrency and well, of course, I'm not going to be able to think of a good example right now. They asked me about design patterns and stuff like that. I'm like, well, why would I want to use a design pattern? I'll start going in on them. Like, name me one design pattern that doesn't tightly couple state with behavior. Now, why would I do that? And I'll just start going in on them, and I'll try to disqualify myself from the interview. They hired me anyway. But
what is happening to you is what Joseph Al-Bahari. I really love that guy, even though he's mostly a C# guy. But I can pretty much credit my movement into functional programming to him. What he said is that what you're experiencing, Scott, is something called the blob reflex, right? So the blob reflex is this idea that, you see, languages fall on a spectrum from least amount of power. From most amount of power with least expressiveness, like assembly, all the way to least amount of power. Power here means flexibility to do whatever you like. Least amount of power, which is Haskell, with the most expressiveness, right? Or the most abstractness. So languages fall in that spectrum. And in the middle, there is a language called Blob. It could be any language, right? That sits smack dab in the middle. It is not as primitive as assembly, and it is not as abstract or as proof, it's not as abstract as something like Haskell. So today, that Blob is exactly Java. That's where it sits, right in the middle. As C# sits a little bit in front of Java. Now, when I first heard that, I was like, what? Imagine me, a C# developer. I've been coding C#, and in my mind, C# was like the ultimate in power and expressiveness and the best language ever. And somebody's telling me that C# isn't even like considered a strong language. That is kind of mild in the middle. That blew my mind. And he was the guy that mentioned it. Yeah, but it sounded absurd to me. And what he now goes on to do was, he said that the blob reflex is saying that if you sit towards the left, you will look at the people on the right as idiots. So for example, the Java people saw the people who wrote in C as idiots, right? It's like, why can't you just use a class? Don't you know classes, objects, polymorphism? You can do all this. You can do all those shit without. Hold on, let me put this thing on mute. Say you can do classes, you can do polymorphism, inheritance, and all this kind of stuff, right? And the C people saw the Java people as, oh, Java is this language that's pretty much elitist, and it's pretty much C with a bunch of extra stuff that I don't care about. Do you see where this is going? And the
I don't want to give up my control, right? That's probably the argument. I don't want to give up my control.
Yes.
That's what Java developers do. It's like, I don't want to use inference. I want to declare the type that I'm going to use, even though I'm assigning a value of a type that the compiler can infer for me. No, I just want to be explicit, right?
Why can't I just update this variable as I move along? It's like, what's wrong with you people? So that's what happened. And the assembly people did that to the C people as well. So C people told the assembly people, you guys are idiots. The fact that you don't have loops, just using go to everywhere. And the assembly people saw C as, it's this weird language that doesn't allow me to use go to anyhow I like, or I have to use if statements rather than using jumpers and all this kind of stuff. And it removes control from me. So that is the continuum, right? And you see a lot. And at the end of that continuum is Haskell. Haskell is a language that is strict as fuck.
It's not the end. Haskell is not the
end. Yeah, Haskell is even the end. You have languages like F-star and Idris that are even meaner than that.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I never really thought about it like that, but it makes sense. And of course, your frame froze and your audio. Is this the end of the video? Oh, okay. So you're back.
It's like, sorry. So the point here is that blob reflex, right? People like us who use F#, who see things like union types, who see things like currying, who see things like pipelining, right? We look at the C# people and are like, what's wrong with these guys? Like, can't you see that what you're doing is hurting you? The fact that you can just mutate variables is putting you in a precarious state. Yeah, so it's normal, right? And for me, the way he convinced me to move towards F# was, he opened my eyes to something important, which is link. Link in C# is what F#. Link is C# trying to be like F#, right? And when I was coding C#, Link was one of my favorite things. And what it did was it allowed me this expressiveness to not have to deal with the low-level writing of loops and all that. So what he did was to use that hedge to say, okay, you use link, you understand link, link makes sense to you. Let's use that to explain functional concepts. And there's this popular talk, if I have the link, I'll send it. But that talk is where you can't hear me.
No, I hear you.
Can
It's
you hear
just,
me?
yeah, I hear you. I just start shaking my head because I get into arguments on Twitter about, oh, I'm learning functional programming in C sharp. I'm like, no, you're not. They're like, I am. I'm embracing Link. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, so I started shaking my head
No.
because I have arguments with people that, so functional programming is cool now, and so now they're trying to like affiliate themselves. Of course, the frame froze again, so I don't know if you hear me. So functional programming is cool now. It's hipster. So now you have these enterprise developers that are trying to affiliate themselves to functional programming, saying, "Yo, I'm writing C sharp functionally." I'm like, "No, you're writing C sharp with Link. That's all you're doing." Like, you still use for loops, right? You're still mutating stuff, and it gets to a whole argument of what really is functional programming, because to them, functional programming is Link. To me, functional programming is immutability. It's your reliance on the three building blocks of that paradigm, which is map, filter, reduce. It's leveraging currying for dependency injection, right? It's a number of a combination of properties and disciplines that makes it functional programming. It's not programming with functions that makes it functional programming. It's the combination of half a dozen different disciplines or default behaviors of the programming language or compiler that makes it functional programming, right? But people don't get that. They'll just say, and my biggest argument is, you are not doing functional programming if you can't pass with minimal effort a function as an argument to another function, period. Can you do that? And the answer is no, they can't, right? And this is where you have to rely on either an action type or a func type, and you have to write all this boilerplate in order to accomplish that. And with functional programming, the language is going to permit you to just treat it as an arbitrary value. Functions are values. So I say all this, I give this dissertation because people are now, I'm starting to hear podcasts about functional programming in C++, functional programming in JavaScript. And it's like, it's not. And stop trying to sell people. I feel like what functional programming is experiencing with misinformation and people that really don't know what they're talking about is the same thing that we've experienced with Agile. You have people that don't really do it, but they're trying to convince other people to feel good about themselves by doing it incorrectly with tech that's not conducive to it. And it just frustrates me. So I'm done venting.
Yeah, no, hold on. You are right. You're correct. However, I will say that approach actually worked for me. Okay. The approach worked for me. And if it worked for me, it means the guy did something right. And I'll tell you what he did right. What he did right is to not make the concepts alien, because they are alien enough already. Does that make sense? The concepts of functional programming are already alien. So what he did was take this alien concept and try to bring it down. But what has happened instead is that people have now taken it that, okay, because I'm doing something close to the metaphor of what it is, therefore I am doing what it is, right? And I think that's what you are pushing back on. So, for example, I'm able to use action and func in C sharp, therefore I'm writing functional programming. And it's like, no, you are not. Action and func are like a metaphor for what you would do in a functional language with actual functional programming languages. But there is this perception in C# land that, oh, the moment I'm using action and funk, I'm writing functional programming. So, but that said, I really feel like action and funk are the closest way to make that jump to becoming a functional programmer. Because if when you enter, that's my opinion anyway. Like, for example, let me give you a classic example. Imagine me, who has been writing, functional programming for a while. I was now writing an Android application with Java. And I quickly realized that up until Java 8, right, they didn't have a way of passing functions as arguments. So what I did was, because I knew that in .NET, your delegates, your func and your action gets compiled into like a single method interface. So I now wrote a single method interface that I pass into the, I write a single method interface that I can now have different functions as the implementations of them, and I pass them into objects. And I remember, during a code review, myself and one of the other guys who is a proper Java developer,
Oh shoot! Are you still there?
Yeah. Just give me 1 second. I think I know what is causing this network to break, and I think I can quickly fix it.
Or you got yelling
So
to the
let's
other
go
room
back. Yeah, I think part of it is, hold on. So how's the network now? Is it better?
No, I don't even know how to measure that. I mean, on my screen, the stuff is still pixelated.
Okay, maybe. Oh, really? Okay, hopefully, let's see if this gets better now. All right. Okay, let's hope for the best. It's better now. So what was I saying? I was talking about yeah. I feel like because why I want you to watch that video, or why I recommend that video to people, is that there is a hunger for functional programming principles, but because people don't understand it, they don't understand what functional programming is, they tend to abuse it in a language that wasn't designed for it. Like I gave an example.
And there's bad habits that develop from it, and then to get retaught to other people. And that's my, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but that's my biggest issue.
No, it's fine.
I feel like it's analogous to Agile, and people that never programmed, never built anything in their life in regards to software are these Agile gurus that will go to your floor at your office campus and have a 3-day seminar, right? And it's just, I see where it's going, and I don't like it. Like you keep trying to declare yourself a functional programmer. You write some blog posts and you do some conference talks on C# and functional programming, or C++ and functional programming, or assembly language and functional programming. And it's like, what you're really doing is teaching people bad techniques that they're going to carry on to real programming, a real functional programming language. And I just disagree with it, man. You're teaching people bad habits, right? And I'm just not with it. So
yeah. So I saw a question here where someone says something like, "This is the first time I've really heard functional programming as a topic. Seems more advanced, but how can functional programming be defined?" I think Scott just did that, right? Where he said functional programming is a bunch of concepts, but all those concepts. Okay, let's put it this way: what is structural programming? If you think about structural programming, it came out as a result of people saying, Dijkstra had a famous paper where he said, "Go-to considered harmful," because you have to understand where programming was before. The way we wrote programs before was, you had labels with instructions, instruction 1, instruction 2, instruction 3. Then there was a go-to that goes to instruction 5, and the go-to could even go back to instruction 1. That was how they did loops. So when they execute instructions, they will say jump back to instruction 1. And if they wanted to do if statements, they'll say, okay, jump to this instruction, jump to that instruction. And what ended up being the consequence of that was that simple programs that we look at today as simple programs were incredibly complicated, because reading through them, you'd have to read sequentially not like a compiler now, but you'd have to read sequentially like a machine, essentially, right? And that was difficult. It wasn't until Dijkstra came out and said, we need to eliminate goto. And that need to eliminate goto gave birth to a lot of constructs that we use today. The for loops, the while loops, the if statements, the switch statement are all consequences of trying to eliminate goto. Okay?
With emphasis on consequences.
Yes. And yes, and now functional programming is saying we need to eliminate state from our programs. What is state? State is things that can change. Yes. So eliminating state, think about it.
It's not from our programs. It's we need to isolate state from our programs. Right?
Okay, let me change that. Hold on. Let me change that phrase. It's not that we're trying to eliminate state. All programs must have state. Even Haskell has state, right? We want to make the order of execution irrelevant, because that's what state is. What state here I mean is anytime you mutate something, then the order of execution becomes relevant. So say, for example, I wrote some expressions. Those expressions, the order in which they execute is not relevant. The moment I try to mutate something, then it's as if the world is split in two. There is the world before that statement, and there is the world after that mutation. Does that make sense? So that is what makes programming hard, because if you're looking at, okay, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, you have to keep in your mind what is going on, the changes that are taking place. And those changes that are taking place is what I refer to as state. Does that make sense? I'm not talking about, user input or stuff like that. I'm talking about looking at a piece of code and knowing what the code is doing without executing it. So that idea of isolating state, which is still correct, because what he said, that idea of isolating state is what gave birth to all of the functional programming principles like currying, principles of purity, principles of reference transparency and stuff like that are born out of the fact that we need to deal with state, whether isolating it, whether getting rid of it, whatever. And anybody who hasn't been caught up in a huge code base that is a mess won't really appreciate how freeing that is. The same way people who weren't caught up in the go-to madness won't do you understand? They won't really appreciate what while loops, for loops, and code did for programming. You get what I mean? So yeah, that's what I feel like. And believe it or not, it was that guy's video that helped me understand this very thing I'm telling you, because he explained it the way I'm explaining it to you, that the whole point of functional programming is to make the order of execution irrelevant. So if you think of SQL, let's take SQL as an example. When you write an SQL statement, you don't know what order the data is getting fetched, right? It could start from the middle, it could start from the end, it could start from the beginning, and that is transparent to you, right? Which has some freeing characteristics to it. When you write an SQL query, select star from this, join this, group by this, and all that, right? You're not thinking of how it's going to be done. You're only thinking of, this is what I am, but describing the solution. This is what I want to happen. Yeah, it's difficult to explain from someone who is on the other side, but part of the reason I really enjoyed that video, and if I find, I wish I can find the link, I'll post a link to it, because it opened my eyes, really. In fact, it was that video I watched and I said, like, wow, I need to go and learn Haskell. And I dived into Haskell and I was like, oh no, I'm not, I need something that is more pragmatic for me. And that's how I settled on F#. So it's not an accident that I got to F#. And if it's not an accident, I feel like other people too would also follow that.
You went out again. I'll just say that I took on F sharp because I was in a hick town working a contract, and I didn't have anything to do with my life. And so when I got off work, I decided to learn a new language, and I just happened to pick F sharp. And that was it.
Oh wow, that was it. Cool, cool. Let me look for that video. What was the name of the video again?
The 4 limitation. Oh, you talking about someone else, or the talk that I gave, the live stream I did 2 days ago called the 4 limitations of the OOP developer? And I literally just live streamed it. Like, I didn't really have anything put together.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just started bashing
I think
developers.
I would like to I would like to check it out, right? Yeah, there's no way. Okay, let me send you the link in private chat, and you can paste it in the comments. I didn't log in, and so as a result, I can't reply to the comments.
What link is this?
Yeah, that's the link to the video that just kicked off my whole functional programming journey.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, so I feel like a lot more C# developers need to watch that, because they will never get. It's difficult for them to get why F# people are so bullish sometimes. Why it feels like we act elitist. We only act elitist because, yeah, yeah, we only act like bullies because we see things differently, right? The same way C# people will look down at people who write in C and C++, like, yeah, what are you doing?
Well,
like C in particular. C++ is better, but C in particular is like, ew. You know, imagine somebody came out today and said, I'm a C programmer. You're going to look at him like, yeah, it's cute.
let me start over. I'll be brutally honest, and it is frowned upon, but I'm just being honest. The other motivation for me sticking with F# and still developing my skills is the fact that I'm an underrepresented minority, and there's still, at least in America, regardless of if people want to admit it, there's people that have superiority complexes. And so I feel like I owe it to myself and people that look like me to be 5 years more advanced than mainstream. And one is because people are just going to assume, some people will just assume that I'm just not skilled to do the job. So I have to overwhelm the employer or the clients with a skill set that their team just doesn't have. And that might be me just being paranoid, or me just having being confused about what reality really is. But I do believe that, given my condition and society's condition of how we automatically put people in the buckets based on what we see on television, that I really have to demonstrate a more advanced knowledge and be able to deliver faster with higher quality. And so I have to do that. I have to stay ahead of everybody else. So that's the motivation for why I keep going.
I think you and I are, and that's part of the reason why our conversations are so interesting, is that even though we are both, Black people, our experiences, our mindsets are very different. Like, I've not experienced it. It wasn't until last year that I started getting what you were saying about, being a Black guy, people starting to assume that, oh, this person is not as technical and all that, right? Because up until that point, I'd never experienced it before. And when I experienced it, I was like, whoa, it was like, it blew my mind. And so, like, for me, that wasn't my motivation initially, right? So my motivation was because, and part of the reason is, growing up in Nigeria and everything, everybody around me is Black, for the most part. And Nigeria is the most populous Black nation, right? So we have over 200 million people, all Black. So that's almost the population of the United States, like 2/3 the population of the United States. And it's all Black people. So that has never really crossed my mind in terms of being motivated. But it wasn't until I left the country, I started talking with people, I started interacting with people from other countries in Europe and all that. I started to see such things, and I was like, whoa. But other than that, my own motivation for climbing to the top is because I just feel like I want to be world class. That's always something that I've always told myself. I remember sitting down with developers, and we were working on certain projects and stuff like that. And I was telling them, jokingly that, look, I work in Microsoft. It was a joke, obviously, but it came out of this desire to be able to compete with the best in the world. That means studying more than every other person, going into looking at projects, outworking every other person, doing whatever needs to be done, right? Practicing and practicing, honing my skills. So that's where my own motivation came from. I just want to be among the best in the world. Now, the higher I climb, the more I realize that goal is so far away.
Well, in the world, yeah. But like something that you probably heard me say before is, and I declared this like 5 years ago. I was like, yo, I'm going to be the technical authority of F# in the state of Florida.
Mm.
I made that declaration, and honestly, I believe it. Like,
yeah, no, I think
I could be wrong, but I sincerely believe that that's what I declared that I was going to be. I made sure I scoped it to a state, and I just kept on doing it until I became it, right? And so, yeah, there's people out there that are light years ahead of me. Like one dude is named Fyodor Sadukin or something like that, on Stack Overflow. Whenever I ask a question on Stack Overflow for F#, he the way he writes, I feel like he talks down to me, he belittles me, but he writes an essay that answers my question every single time, even though he makes me feel like an idiot. And I think he really purposely wants to make me feel like an idiot. But I can't argue with how talented he is, right?
Yes.
So yeah, there's people that are way light years ahead of me, and I just have to be honest with myself. Like, I don't have enough time in the day to even catch up to them. I don't, and it's probably a combination of genetics. Of they're probably borderline genius, and they spend a lot of time just writing code, and I can't catch up with them. But I know that I believe I'm within like the 85th percentile. That dude, he's like in the 99th percentile. Like I just won't be able to catch up with him.
So so part of the reason I feel like I have progressed in my career was because when I started.
Oh boy, lost you again. Let's see if you actually come back.
Okay.
You gotta rewind.
Okay, let me rewind. So part of the reason why I feel like I've made so much progress in my career is because I had the privilege of sitting beside a guy, Stanley. We worked together at here in Nigeria, in Lagos, and I can tell you for a fact that guy is a freaking genius. Like, very, very few people can match his level of genius in terms of. So, just to give you a hint as to the kind of person he is, right? The moment he started learning C++, he decided to write his own multi-threading library, just like that, right? And he had hacky ways of doing it. The moment he learned how to write parsers, he decided to write his own application. He created his own language that allows him to create parsers on the fly. That's the kind of person he is. So even though, like the guy you just mentioned on Stack Overflow, right? So anytime you have a problem, he goes into details explaining it, and it feels condescending. But looking on the bright side, you're getting better.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? So every time he gives that essay, you are no more ignorant on that particular topic anymore. And the number of concepts are finite. They are not infinite. The number of concepts you need to learn, the number of things you need to know are all finite. Meaning that every time that happens, you get closer and closer to becoming a master like him. Does that make sense? So if I meet someone like that, I don't let them go. Let me put it like that. Like I hold on to them because every time they belittle me, I get better. And it now gets to a point where when I have conversations with this guy, Stanley, I told you about, right? There are certain things that, when we talk about, it feels obvious that when I talk to another person, I'm like, obviously, this is it. And they're like, wow, how, what do you mean? How, it's not obvious. Can you break it down? And I realized that, oh, I have gotten significantly better from just interacting with this guy. Does that make sense? So, I feel like you should, if you have anybody like that in your life, if you see someone that is clearly better than you, hold on to that person. Because as the person is moving up, because what happens, this is what happens. What happens is the more knowledge you gain, getting up to the person, the more knowledge that person gains as well. So it's almost like he's pulling you up because both of you are moving, in tandem in a way. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Just take into consideration that works for people that are driven, right? Like real talk. I've worked in shops where they didn't seem to not value me giving them information or me helping them become more effective. Like I feel like some people, like, they kind of boost their ego. The ego is probably the most valuable thing for a human being. As much as it works against you, it's the reason why we have everything that we have today, right? Based on capitalism. But I was just going to say that some people, if you genuinely come off as if you're very knowledgeable and you try to, I don't want to use the word critique, but ultimately try to assist people in understanding alternative ways that they could solve that problem that may be more maintainable. There's people that just ain't trying to hear that because they're so focused on, well, this is what I did, and now you're telling me that this isn't good enough. And like, who are you to tell me that? Like, they process it a different way. In a way, I kind of feel like they process it as, because it's coming from that person, I don't want to accept that. And that's happened to me before, where like, if it comes from a published author, then it's fine. But if it comes from me, then like, they don't know. We're going to have a discussion about that and involve some more people. I just get tired of it. So in conclusion, some people embrace learning regardless of who it comes from. Other people, they don't really like learning from whoever. They have a preferred person that they want to receive guidance from. And it's just a hard pill to swallow. But that's just my reality, which
I think one way you can hack this. I think one way you can hack the system would be to write your own book. For real. I think that's the serious way of yeah. No. I'll tell you why. I think you should write your own book, right? It's very simple. You write your book. You can still use your name, Scott Nimrod. It's fine. And just have your book out. Okay? The reason is, let's have a killer topic like some of the topics you mentioned. The reason is, once your book comes out, like you said, people, when they see something is written, they take it as authority. Oh, there's a book on this. Therefore, the author must be the expert. The author knows everything and he got it right out of the gate, right? Even though they haven't met you in
theory. Look, when you're dealing with enterprise developers that have been doing the same thing the same way for the past 20 years, they don't care. They don't. They don't. So this is the way we do it here. You come in and you forget, I get hired as a contractor or as a consultant. I'm not a full-time employee. So I get hired to help people expedite, or usually I get hired to rescue projects. And management cares. Management will understand my potential in helping them. But they're enterprise developers, these people that show up on Dilbert cartoons, they don't give an F. They really don't. So I just accept that,
let's go back to. I feel like we may need to go down the route of guilds. You know what a guild is, right? Where you would have like a software engineering guild. Maybe you would have F# guild. You would have like, imagine if you, Scott, for example, had developers that you trained. It's pretty much how martial art masters were. So they had different practices and skills, and then a master would teach students, and people will know that, oh, I'm from so school of Bushido, or I'm from so school of this, and even the way they act, the way they did things, you could tell that this is the school they came out from. I think like we need.
God damn it, Odie. Lost you again. Microphone check. You gotta rewind.
Sorry. Let me rewind. Let me rewind.
But I kind of know what you're saying.
I was saying that.
But I was just going to say.
Instead of calling Scott, okay. Sorry.
Go.
Instead of calling Scott to say, Scott, we need you to defend. We need you to rescue this project. Instead, they would sign a contract with a guild. Like the contract would be, domain-driven developers guild, or I don't know what to call it, firm, or whatever the case may be, where Scott may be the principal partner in that company, similar to law firms, right? So companies have lawyers that they pay for simple law issues and law consultancies. However, when there is a big case, they go to law firms, right? It's not like the lawyer that they have on staff can't really do it, but they go to the big firms that specialize in specific aspects of law. And I feel like software engineering needs to get to that level where we have guilds that take projects and rescue projects as a guild. That way, the reputation of the guild is at stake.
So what's the difference between a guild and IBM and Microsoft or Google that come in, charge $300 an hour to assess the project and then do whatever they need to do to get the project back on track and deliver it? What's the difference?
So the difference is that Microsoft, Google all have products. The guild is not, the product of the guild is the software engineering. Does that make sense?
Well, your Google, your IBM, your Microsoft, they're really a whole bunch of different businesses under the umbrella name of Microsoft, IBM, and Google, right?
Okay.
Like Microsoft is hundreds, if not thousands, of different businesses that each use the trademark Microsoft, right? At first, when you start saying guild, the first thing I thought about is university, right? So you think about lawyers or doctors, you think about what school they came out of. And so like, I don't know that much about medicine, but if someone came out of Harvard, Yale, whatever Ivy League school, then like they're the cream of the crop because supposedly those schools have really good programs for XYZ, right? That's the first thing I thought about when it came to guild. And that's kind of done, right?
Not quite. In my analogy, the guilds will be the law firms, not the schools where they graduated from. So you have law firms like PwC, you have law firms like, I don't really know law firms in America, but there are law firms that are prestigious, that people know that, okay, if we really want to win this case, we need to get the services of this firm, and they pay millions of dollars because what is at stake is a lot, right? With critical cases, and then they can trust that the law firms have the experts in whatever field, whether it's oil and gas or whatever, to be able to properly defend them. I feel like that has to happen in software engineering as well. So you would have software engineering firms that specialize in specific projects. Okay, these guys specialize in building payment platforms, for example. So it's just an example. So anytime you're building if you have an in-house product you're working on, and all of a sudden the project is going astray, and you would go and pay millions of dollars to a software engineering firm. They bring in their experts, who, of course, the software engineering firms will pay heavily, right? And those guys are not beholden to any company per se. So they have a lot more freedom and autonomy, just like lawyers. And they can just come in, see your problem, and because they have a lot of expertise in it. And of course, the guild is the one responsible to make sure that the engineers, I'm sorry, the lawyers follow their protocol, right? The lawyers don't try to do shady things or stuff like that. So I feel like that has to happen in software engineering as well.
I feel like that's not going to happen unless software engineering becomes regulated by the Fed or by the state. Because it seems like the examples or illustrations that you just provided are examples of industries that are regulated. Law, healthcare, etc.
I get that, but I don't think regulation is a necessity in this case, right? The markets can regulate themselves too, and we've seen that happen a bunch of times, where the quality of certain brands just make them stand out, and all of a sudden you now realize that sure, I can start my own law firm tomorrow. It doesn't mean I will go very far. Do you understand? Unless I have clout,
Yeah, but the thing is, you're still licensed to do that work, and it's recognized by a government at a government level that you're qualified to do that work. I hear what you're saying. I just feel like the motivation won't occur until there's government regulation that pushes that agenda.
So I don't think so. Here's my pushback. The reason why I'm pushing back on legislation is that it's already happening, but maybe at a smaller level, right? So you have companies like Andela, for example, who go to Silicon Valley, look for projects that are almost dead, in Silicon Valley, and they take it over, and then they outsource it to people in Nigeria, for example, right? Developers they've trained in-house in Nigeria to really do that work. And now because of exchange rate and all that, they can afford to pay less for really high quality work. That's just an example, right? So at the end of the day, the Andela's job is to make sure that their developers are following the highest standards. And then, because if a project goes bad, it's not the developer, it's Andela's reputation that's at stake. Does that make sense? So they have a reputation to protect. Whereas if the developer that was working here actually goes and works for the company, all of that is lost because he will just do whatever he feels like. After all, he's collecting a salary, right? So, and that's part of the reason why someone like you coming in as a consultant saying, this is wrong, let's not do it this way, let's do it that way. It's like you're preaching to a stone wall, because as far as that person is concerned, he just wants to do his 9 to 5, get his paycheck and move on. So you are actually introducing friction to that whole system. But once you separate the developers, the practitioners from the customers, in quotes, then you have this situation where you have an intermediary that ensures that we meet certain quality thresholds, right? And so on and so forth. So that's how
that makes sense.
And again, there's the ethical part to it as well. So you have scenarios where companies will tell their in-house software developers to break the rules. Just do it anyhow. Just deliver it anyhow it is, right? It doesn't matter if it kills people, and stuff like that. So, but if you have an intermediary third party whose reputation is on the line, then they know that, look, we can't afford to screw this up. Otherwise, it rubs off badly on us, because we are the one providing the engineering services. It's our neck that's on the line, And I imagine that the people at the top of companies aren't necessarily lawyers, for example, and they aren't necessarily software engineers. That also means that, and because of that, they may not make decisions that they may not understand technical depth, for example. Whereas the head of the software firms would be software engineers, and they would understand that, look, this is technical debt, and if we continue like this software is going to show up badly, And if it shows up, and if it ends up badly, it rubs off badly on us. Does that make sense? So that's what I feel anyway.
Yeah, it makes sense. Good luck on that. Actually, well, you say you already see it coming, so
Yeah.
we'll see. Oh, Odie, I'm starting to tap out, man.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I've been having calls all day, but it was really important that we chatted, because I know it's been a while since we talked, and I've been just so busy. And I was like, no, I have to make out time, no matter how hard, no matter how hard it is, So
Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't
yeah,
know.
no problem.
Maybe next time we'll chop it up. Will probably be prior to the F Sharp Exchange conference.
Okay, no problem.
Hey, do it big. You can ping me or Odie, maybe even Roman.
Yeah,
If there's any more material or requests that you have, and we could try our best to get you in a direction where you could, start plowing forward. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you pasted that link. Okay, yeah, you pasted the link, because I really, if there's anything that anyone takes away from this stream, it will be that link, to be honest. So I also suggest you put it in the
description.
YouTube, yeah, in description in YouTube, because that was it. That was like my light bulb
Epiphany.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
epiphany moment. So yeah.
Oh, all right. Well,
All right, man. I really enjoyed this talk. It's been
yeah.
nice talking to you again.
I feel like we covered. What did we cover? Just in conclusion, we covered the ever-going debate about F sharp, ever gaining traction.
Yeah.
We discussed the last part was guilt, and then we also discussed uh, the maybe it's paranoia. I don't know, of being a underrepresented minority that wants to be taken seriously in the industry, and the fact that they feel that they have to be more advanced than mainstream. In this case, their white counterparts to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
I feel like there's one other item, but oh yeah, we talked about what really is functional programming. It's not programming with functions. It's a set of behaviors and disciplines that usually the compiler is going to encourage. And I feel like there's one more that I'm missing. I can't think of it. Yeah, whatever. I can't think of the last one. So,
Sure.
all right. Roman,
All right.
big, and there was also Carrie. I think she dropped off, or he, whatever. Been real. Thanks for observing the stream. We'll catch up. Bye. Hitting in broadcast.